Steve put together a fucking game show and didn't tell me. Are you ready?
Ding, 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 ding.
Ever wondered if you're too old to ride, or if a banana peel can actually take down your bike? Or maybe you're curious about the real dangers of motorcycling and how to protect yourself. Today we're diving deep into the burning questions riders have. Some serious and some, well, you'll see. We recently asked our audience for the top motorcycle questions with the promise they would remain anonymous and the encouragement that there is no question too stupid or out of line. We've got some really interesting ones from our Facebook community. Wish us luck. Okay, Pete, we've broken these questions into 5 specific topics. The topics are licensing and legality, ownership and costs, safety and risks, accidents and aftermath, and finally, riding and maintenance. Are you ready? Topic 1, licensing and legality. What are the steps to getting a motorcycle license and how hard is it to get one for $100?
So step number 1 is you have to pass a written test to show that you know the stuff. Step number 2 is you have to pass a riding test to show that in addition to knowing the stuff, you can actually operate a motorcycle.
What happens if you drive a motorcycle without a license?
Nothing unless you get caught.
Fair. Is it illegal to run a motorcycle or an auto repair business out of your house?
It depends on where your house is. You know, it's going to depend on zoning ordinances and whether your house is in a strictly residential area or something different than strictly residential.
And for the final question of topic 1, is it illegal to ride or run a motorcycle in your house?
Not that I know of, but I can't imagine any scenario why anybody would want to.
Fair. Moving on to topic 2, ownership and costs. Pete, you're known for speaking your mind and being an all-around, no BS kind of guy. In your honest opinion, what are the pros and cons of owning a motorcycle?
The pros are it's freaking awesome. The cons are there really aren't any. I mean, just motorcycle ownership is awesome. It opens up a whole different world to you. I mean, and I'm being kind of a smart ass when I say that there are no cons, because there are cons. I mean, we all know it's more dangerous.
Right.
We all know that if we get into the same wreck in a motorcycle and in a car, what happens to us on the motorcycle is going to be much worse than the car. Short of that, it's having a motorcycle is awesome, and it's just the dangers that you have to accept are a part of the package.
At what age are you too old to ride a motorcycle?
I don't know. I mean, at what age are you too old to hold a seat in the United States Senate? I mean, you know, I figure if you're 90 and you can still be a U.S. Senator or a Supreme Court Justice, it's probably okay to ride a motorcycle at that age as well. Again, I'm being a bit of a smartass here, but ultimately it comes down to intellectual ability and physical ability.
Sure.
If you've still got both of them sufficient to safely drive, then you're fine. You're never too old to ride a motorcycle. If you're getting a little old to hold up that 800 pounds at a stop sign, get a trike and you're fine.
Fair. And if you've failed the ability to even drive a car, then perhaps it's time to get off the road.
Yeah, if you're having trouble with the car, it's not time to get on a motorcycle.
Fair. Moving on to topic 3, safety and risks. I've heard many riders say, it's not if you go down, it's when. Is this true? Do all motorcyclists crash eventually?
I don't take that statement as one meaning that everybody crashes eventually, but I do take it to mean that everybody's going to drop their bike eventually. And as far as I can tell, that's true. Everybody I know has dropped their bike at least once. It just happens. Might be you get just slightly off balance and you got 800 pounds that wants to fall on the ground. It might be too late to avoid it. So you let that 800 pounds fall on the ground and figure out how to deal with it after that. But thankfully, most people do not get in crashes.
I know there are a bunch of factors in your estimation, but what are the odds of surviving a motorcycle crash in your opinion?
Well, the odds of surviving a motorcycle crash are much, much better if you do all the things that are necessary to never get in one in the first place. Because if you ride down the road blindly, and I don't mean literally, but if you ride down the road and you're not thinking about all the things that could go wrong,
Sure.
then you're already that much closer to getting in a wreck.
Sure.
As long as you foresee all the things that can happen, you ride so as to avoid those things happening, then your chances of getting in a wreck are far less in the first place. But I mean, once you're in a wreck, what are your chances of surviving? I mean, geez, there are so many variables there, but a lot of it's going to depend on what are you wearing for protective equipment.
Sure.
And even then, protective equipment's not going to protect you in all situations. A motorcycle helmet will protect you in some scenarios, but it's not going to protect you if you go into the back of a semi going 70 miles an hour.
Sure.
So using appropriate protective equipment, having the training to be able to operate your bike properly, having the foresight to think your way through the different scenarios in advance so you know how to deal with them if they actually happen. Those are all ways that you can avoid getting in wrecks and, of course, much worse, getting killed in a wreck.
So why do people ride motorcycles if it's so dangerous?
It's more dangerous to drive a car from Cedar Rapids to Des Moines than it is to walk from Cedar Rapids to Des Moines. But there are a lot of reasons that have to do with convenience that make driving that car preferable.
Sure.
It's trade-offs. So you're taking more risk, but the benefit of getting to Des Moines in 2 hours instead of 2 days overrides the risks. So with a motorcycle, I mean, yeah, there are risks, but it's just something where if you love riding a motorcycle, and pretty much anybody I've ever known that has ever ridden a motorcycle loves riding a motorcycle, then it's worth the increased risks.
Is there a reason why motorcycles are legal if they are so much more dangerous than a car?
Well, a motorcycle itself is not inherently dangerous.
Gotcha.
It's what happens out on the roadway and how it affects the motorcyclist that's more dangerous. I could ride my motorcycle up and down the road from now till the day I die and never have a problem, but then you take some dude that's not paying attention to what he's doing and have him come to an intersecting road out there in the country where I'm blissfully riding down the road. He comes through the stop sign and he smokes me and I'm dead.
Right.
So it's not that the motorcycle was inherently dangerous, it's that that guy drove dangerously.
Sure.
And I was more susceptible to injury because I was on my motorcycle instead of in my truck.
Next question on here. Is it safe to ride a motorcycle in the winter?
Ooh. Number one, it'd be really cold.
There's that.
But I wouldn't want to. I mean, it's just a fact that in the winter, you get snow and ice on the roads.
Sure.
When you have snow and ice on the roads, I mean, just think of it in terms of being on a bicycle and being on a slick surface. It's a lot easier to fall down on a slick surface on a bicycle than it is in a car.
Sure.
Same thing with a motorcycle. So if you're going to be on a snowy, icy surface, it's better to have 4 wheels under you than 2. It's kind of a big deal at that point.
Center of gravity and whatnot.
Yeah. It's definitely more dangerous on a motorcycle in the winter.
What would you do if someone damaged your motorcycle?
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Politely ask them to pay for the damage that they caused.
Fair. Let's move on to topic 4, accidents and aftermath. I know lane splitting is legal in some places and not in others. A few questions here. First, for those who may not know, what is lane splitting and is it legal in Iowa?
Lane splitting is, and imagine yourself in a traffic standstill out on the freeway. There are 4 lanes going each way. All 4 lanes are jam-packed with cars. Along the dotted lines, here comes a motorcycle from 10 miles back, and it goes on the dotted lines in between all the standstill traffic, and it goes right past all the standstill traffic because it can in a state where lane splitting is legal.
And in those states where lane splitting is legal, who's at fault if the biker gets in a crash during lane splitting?
Well, who's at fault in any crash is going to depend on the particular facts of the crash as tempered by what the law in the jurisdiction is. So if it's legal to lane split, then that's not going to be a factor that's going to be held against the biker. But you still look at the totality of the conduct of both drivers in light of what the law of the jurisdiction is, and that's going to tell you who's at fault.
Fair. Moving on, I know you've worked with thousands of riders who have been involved in a crash. Have you ever been in a motorcycle crash?
Yes.
What does it feel like to be in a crash since you've been in one?
It's horrifying. Things happen really fast and in slow motion all at once. It's just really horrifying.
And here's a direct question from a viewer. I was in an auto accident. The other driver was at fault and totaled my vehicle. Their insurance denied coverage and will not pay for anything. What are my options at this point? Is there anything more I can do?
A, take it. B, hire a lawyer and sue him.
Fair. How is the family notified if someone dies in a crash?
I don't think there's any one single answer to this, but I believe your typical answer is that law enforcement's going to show up at the house
Gotcha.
and tell them in person.
Understood. Now, as a curveball here, Pete, we've had a few viewer questions specifically related to trial. The first is, in a court, if a lawyer demands a yes-no answer to a question that simply cannot be answered in a yes-no format, what happens if a witness refuses to provide a simple yes-no answer?
This is a lot easier to resolve, actually, in a courtroom than it would be in a deposition, because in a deposition, if a witness is being slippery and won't answer a question, there's not a hell of a lot you can do right there on the spot, because you don't have somebody in a black robe to resolve disputes. But if we're in a courtroom,
Yeah.
and I'm asking a question of a witness that yes or no should be the answer, and they're going to go beyond the yes or no, it's pretty easy to get the judge's assistance to shut that down, to make the witness be responsive. But in a courtroom, it doesn't matter what you as the witness think one way or the other about yes or no or how you should answer something. It's, number one, does your answer satisfy the lawyer? And number two, if the answer doesn't satisfy the lawyer, does it satisfy the judge? Because if the judge believes that you're being evasive, incomplete, or dishonest, he's going to be willing to help the lawyer get a straight answer out of you.
Fair. So similarly, one viewer asked, if you refuse to answer questions as a witness, is it a crime? And why or why not is that the case?
Again, if we're in court and you're refusing to answer a question and the judge is telling you to answer the question, well, it's a crime now because you're refusing to do what you've been ordered to do. That's contempt of court. The person might be thinking about the right against self-incrimination, where, yeah, you do not have to answer a question where it might incriminate you. If you're asked a question like that, you simply say, I refuse to answer that question on the grounds that it might tend to incriminate me. If it's legit, that's going to stand.
Fair. So a viewer had a question about legal strategy, and they asked, lawyers on TV are often told to never ask a question to which they don't know the answer. What do they do if a witness responds to a question with an unexpected answer, though?
Well, and your question really has two parts, and the part about never ask a question as a lawyer at trial if you don't know the answer. I remember hearing that before I was a lawyer, when I was a young lawyer, and the whole time I was practicing as a young lawyer. Don't ask at trial if you don't know the answer. The concept is if the witness says something that damages your position, then you're not going to have any way to do damage control if you don't know what the answer was going to be in the first place.
Sure.
But even then, you think you know what the answer is going to be and you've planned it all out, and the witness says something different than what you were expecting. Well, that's where, if you're asking at trial and the witness gives the wrong answer, you have a way of getting the correct answer out of the witness. For example, I've taken that witness's deposition. I asked him, for example, what day the crash happened, and he gave me a specific date.
Sure.
Now we're at trial, and he gives me a different date. Well, I pull out his deposition and I say,
Do you remember in your deposition when I asked you this question and you gave this answer?
yes, I do. You have them tied down. In other words, if I'm asking somebody a question at trial and I truly don't want to ask a question that I don't know the answer to, then I've got the ability to correct the witness, so to speak, to show the jury that the witness is giving the quote-unquote wrong answer. I can prove that the answer is untruthful right then and there. That's really what it means.
Sure. Gotcha. Moving on to our final topic, riding and maintenance. Should motorcycles ride side by side?
No, it's not a good idea.
And why is that?
If you're riding side by side, that means that you have very little room to maneuver if something unexpected happens. For example, you're going down the road side by side with your buddy, and out of the ditch comes a large animal right at you.
Sure.
Well, you probably better not swerve, because a swerve is going to cause you to crash with your buddy.
Right.
Whereas if you were riding in an appropriate manner, in my opinion, you're going to have room to swerve that doesn't endanger your buddy. Riding side by side, not a good idea. However, a close cousin to riding side by side is what we call staggered formation. And that might look to the untrained eye like the motorcyclists are riding side by side, but really they're not. So you've got one motorcyclist, for example, the one riding closest to the center line. And then the next biker behind that one is riding closer to the fog line.
Sure.
And then the next one after that, again, is the center line. So it's kind of every other one. And you've got the guy that's riding close to the center line is at least a second and a half ahead of the rider that's on the fog line, and so on down the way. That way, if somebody needs to make a sudden maneuver, there's room to do it.
That makes sense. Someone wanted to know, can a motorcycle slip on a banana peel?
You know what? I've been doing this for like 40 years, and I see disaster in all kinds of different scenarios, but I've never looked at a banana on the road and thought it was dangerous to me on my motorcycle.
Sure.
Can it? I don't know. I never thought about it until I heard that question. I suppose under the exact wrong set of circumstances, if everything came together in the wrong way all at once, then yeah, it could cause a problem.
How do you stay comfortable on a long motorcycle ride? I mean, you and I, we've ridden 10 plus hours before, and those are lengthy sessions. How do you stay comfortable during those sessions?
For me, the way that I stay comfortable on a long ride is I've got highway pegs on my bike so that I've got two easy different options for where to put my feet. In other words, on my floorboards or on my highway pegs, that moves where the weight is located on my butt, which solves another significant problem. So you're changing, just by changing your foot position, you're changing the pressure on your butt. And that alone, just having somewhere different to put your feet, that alone makes the ride more comfortable and makes it so you can ride for a longer amount of time without feeling like you got to get off the road and take a break.
Fair. Well, Pete, that was a whirlwind of questions, from banana peels to the real dangers of the road. We've covered a lot today, and as always, you've provided some invaluable insights. It's clear that motorcycling is not just about the thrill of the ride, but also about understanding the risks, responsibilities, and rewards. For all our viewers out there, remember that knowledge is power. The more informed you are, the safer and more enjoyable your rides will be. If you found this Q&A session helpful, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe for more content. If you have any more questions, maybe a topic you'd like us to cover, drop them in the comments below, and we might feature them in our next episode. And if you know someone who could benefit from this information, share this video with them. Ride safe. Brought to you by the Biker Lawyers. Injured? Ride with us.